Hi guys, welcome back to History Help for You. Today we're going to be talking about Mary the First, her government, Spanish marriage, and the consequent Wyatt Rebellion. You may notice that we've got some fish in the background as well. Make the slide interesting. We're going to quickly recap Mary the First's attempt at restoring Catholicism. So obviously she had two sort of main religious reforms, being the first and second acts of repeal. Essentially reversing all the sort of religious change under Edward, reinstating the Mass, and obviously the heresy laws for the banning of the heretics. And you also had Cardinal Pole, who was the papal legate, coming into England, reconciling it with Rome and ending the schism. So you also had quite a bit of factionalism within the Privy Council. I've actually used the wrong image on the side because that's under Elizabeth, but hey ho. The council itself was divided by influence and policy direction. There was about 43 people in the council, so a bit bigger than that of Edward's, by a lot. His sort of main rivals were between Gardiner and Paget. Gardiner was conservative, cautious, mainly sort of focused on religious policy, like religious uniformity, but he was also sort of suspicious of foreign influence, probably, most likely, from Spain. Paget favoured the Spanish alliance, kind of the opposite of Gardiner in that sense. He argued for the marriage as a strategic necessity. That way, England has a big ally in Spain. However, Gardiner sort of resented Paget's access to the Queen and influence over foreign policy, and thought that it was a threat to English sovereignty. Interesting. They had different positions, but still quite sort of high up in the Privy Council. Paget was Secretary of State, whereas Gardiner was the Lord Chancellor. Again, Paget was pro-Spanish. Gardiner was more kind of nationalistic, in the sense he wanted to kind of protect England from any sort of wars or anything that could potentially happen because of the Spanish involvement. It turns out Gardiner would kind of be right in that sense. There was also a big concern at the time that because of how influential and powerful Spain was kind of known as a superpower at the time, that England could kind of be like absorbed by Spain into like a satellite state. That's kind of what Gardiner sort of thought, whereas Paget thought the Spanish alliance was completely essential for security and the dynasty. Because the kind of whole point of the Spanish alliance was a marriage alliance, and then also any sort of hopes for children. However, Philip was never in England, so they couldn't get to making. Just put it like that. The marriage treaty itself had quite a lot of worry about it. However, there was some limitations put in place to sort of ensure kind of peace and kind of people agreeing with it in a sense. So a lot of people kind of worried that if Mary marries Philip, he's just gonna take the power. He's just gonna take the power. He's just gonna become King of England. But the condition in the marriage was that he would only be known as King of England during Mary's lifetime. He couldn't after she died, he couldn't still be king, and he needed her consent for all the actions that he took. He couldn't appoint Englishmen to positions or take English money or troops abroad, and upon Mary's death, Philip had no claim at all. The only sort of influence that he would have then is if they had a child and they were on the throne, and obviously Philip having a relationship with that child and giving him some power and control. You also had the Wyatt Rebellion, which was due to a lot of things. It was mainly kind of because of this marriage. So with the marriage kind of came concerns like, what if Philip comes over and becomes King of England and takes control? With that kind of came, what if more Spanish people come over and they do the bit of the racist thing, and they're gonna the Spanish, they're gonna steal the English's jobs. So the English were kind of xenophobic and kind of wary of the Spanish coming over. There was also some dynastic uncertainty, and rightfully so. I mean, in the sense that Philip was never in England, so there was no baby making happening. And there was also quite a lot of religious opposition to Catholicism. You have to acknowledge that England's in a bit of a sticky situation religiously, in the sense that they'd just been Protestant, and now they're suddenly full-blown Catholic. Like, I mean, there's going to be sort of people unwilling to change. There was initially in this rebellion, it was meant to be like 4 rebellions simultaneously. I think like some in Leicestershire, but only the really one in Kent happened, and that was actually because the plans were leaked, so it kind of happened really quickly. They were able to march on London, and they were actually only really stopped by Mary rallying the Londoners and actually just blocking the bridges off so they couldn't get there. And then Mary made a speech at the Guildhall, kind of rallying people, ensuring that she's the Queen of England. The marriage was intended to kind of help the people, and kind of rallying Londoners to come to her aid, and which she actually did. And after the rebellion was finished, both Wyatt and Lady Jane Grey are executed because there was some involvement, I think, from Grey's father or something. This helped to assert Mary's authority. The marriage to Philip proceeded as planned, so there was, the whole kind of point was, oh, we'll rebel and so they won't have to get married. They did anyway. However, there was some wider impact. There was the trust between the sort of crown and the gentry kind of eroded. And yeah, like as I mentioned, it failed to stop the Catholic Restoration or the Spanish Alliance. So that is it for this one, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.